Welcome to People Doing Good for Others. Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we praise and honor and celebrate those who are truly making significant contributions in our communities. I'm Gary York, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. I want to thank Wilkes Communications, RiverStreet Networks, and WIFM for this opportunity, and again, we're glad you're with us today. My very special guest is Ms. Millie Barbee. She grew up in Surry County, a graduate of Guilford College, and a person who's been a significant part of her career in historical preservation, tourism, and mattering in the lives of folks who want to preserve and restore those valuable parts of our lives. So thank you for being with us, and we'll get on the show. Good morning, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's an honor, and you're living down in West Jefferson. You drove down today, so tell us just a little bit about being in Surry County and then Guilford College, and we'll get on with it.
Well, we were blessed, both of us, to be there in Surry County. And I, of course, went to the White Plains High School, and I think I had 17 people in my class at that point, and wonderful teachers, and it was a true blessing, I think, for us to be there when we were, and so many wonderful mentors as well, whom we learned from and who were able to introduce us into different aspects of history and preservation and conservation, which is a biggie on my part particularly. And I just felt like in all the years there and growing up in the community and with the teachers that we had in our Quaker meeting, it was just so very special. And when we grew up, we had great-grandparents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. It was so family-oriented, and now, of course,
Millie, what was after Guilford College and teaching, you remember that first call to be in historical preservation, conservation, restoration? Do you remember the first feeling about that?
Well, I had, of course, majored in history and always loved history and learning more about every aspect of it. And when we had moved to Morganton, and my husband, of course, with the bank, and I had taught part-time, or I taught first in Guilford County, and then I taught in Burke County, and got involved in the Morganton Service League, which does tremendous community work. And that was when the 1837 old Burke County Courthouse was in really bad shape. It was beautiful, Beaux Arts classical design right there, the center of downtown. And it was just so sad to see the condition of it. So we gathered together. Senator Sam Irving was there, and we created Historic Burke Foundation with the help of the Service League and Mary Kistler Stoney. If you know Mary Kistler Stoney, worked with Miss Gertrude Caraway of Newbern to restore the Tryon Palace when it was about to fall into the Trent River. But the focus was, let's restore this beautiful building.
Save the Burke County Courthouse.
Save the old Burke County Courthouse, 1837, which is so rich in history itself. And by working together and raising private money, but also got Burke County and the city of Morganton. We had great leaders there, and they were able to help each work together to help.
Now, is that courthouse being used today?
It's as a museum. Yes, okay, and upstairs is an auditorium, and Historic Burke Foundation is still there. And after putting all that together and my love of history, they just made me director. And I did that for about 20 years.
20 years.
So,
Wow.
and got so involved in working with the legislature, different ones, you know, getting some grant funding. And that was when there were a lot of historic preservation grants, which at this point, we still have some, but not as many.
Millie Barbee, tell us this, if you will. What's the first thing you do when a group comes together? How about the first night? What do we do?
Well, we introduce everybody
Everybody
and get
gets
to
to know
know
everybody.
each other, and we talk about the topics and what the reason we're there, just giving you know, an outline of what we hope to accomplish and listing those in priorities. But my thing, and I guess it's my Quaker heritage and it's worked all these years, is I tease a lot of times, leave your egos at the door.
Right.
We're focusing on what is best, you know, for the organization and in order in whatever project we're working on. And I have spent my whole career trying to build consensus.
Build consensus.
Build consensus, you know
Quaker
where
way.
that all comes
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
And ask people to cooperate and work together, because that's how we accomplish what we're going to do.
Wow.
And
We've just finished that in Surrey County in Dobson, 1918
And the
courthouse.
courthouse.
And I had a tour of it last week, and we have a wonderful Wilkes Heritage Museum here, which was
Right.
the old courthouse over in
Oh,
Wilkesboro. It's
definitely,
just
yes.
a splendid
Beautiful facility.
opportunity for people to remember the good things.
well, I've got to go back and tour the Surrey County one at
Yeah.
some point too, because there were
We
lots
have
of
several
memories.
divisions of the county there, plus the commissioners meet there upstairs.
Right.
So,
Well, that was a
and they have the
beautiful-
holding cell, and you know that's just a lot of wonderful. You've also been in Boone. You did some years in Boone.
Well,
the high
after
country.
when I was in doing Historic Burke Foundation, my husband had a sailboat, and he loved going down because he grew up outside Durham, you know, and of course we met at Guilford. But the folks in Beaufort came up and asked me, they needed a director, and asked me to come down there and
Wow.
serve as their director of the Historic Beaufort Foundation, foundation organization actually. And so we moved down and stayed several years and really enjoyed that. And when I took that job, if you know the Beaufort Historic Site, most all those buildings were in need of preservation, but we were able to work with the community and different organizations and to get some funding and restore.
Tell us
that
about
site.
funding. It'd be a good time to just say the Burke. It came from private, it came from public, it came from grants. Just give us some idea of folks who might want to get interested in historical preservation.
Right.
Where do you get the money?
Well, the biggest thing, you got to have the heart that wants
The
to,
heart.
the heart that really wants to see this thing done, and the commitment, you know, to make it happen. And
Wow, the heart.
and,
Thank you for
well,
that.
you really have to love what you're doing, and that's what we're talking about with our Dalton Park thing yesterday
Yeah.
that we'll talk about later. But the thing is, when people are committed, they want to not only contribute what money they have, but they also will be very helpful in going and raising additional money. And when grants were easier to come by, then that made a lot of the preservation along the way statewide.
Now, we reconnected last spring, I guess it was. The Dalton Park, the wonderful Dalton Park, had been closed. And an effort started for folks that wanted to see it open again on the Parkway.
Yes.
Just tell us about the background and what was going on that morning.
Well, the beauty of that, that was being able to work with our superintendent, who was superintendent at that point, and call attention to...
Superintendent of the Parkway? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And in the community, because the folks in Allegheny, Ashe, Surrey County, all of those mountain counties have always treasured Doughton Park.
Yes.
And the Doughton family, you know, with all of that history, and to see it get in that condition was just so sad. But Superintendent Mark Woods was there, and I've worked with the Park Service. You know, my dad helped build the Park Service. And
Did he?
in the 1930s, in the Great Depression, and he worked with the WPA.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm
Wow.
still trying to preserve it and restore it, but there's so much history there with that. But
So maybe that was your start, was it, you guess?
I imagine it was, because
You
we
knew
all
about it. You grew up with it.
Grew up with it. Remember how we, as young people in the Quaker meeting, and we'd go to Cumberland Knob and have picnics, and we would hike the trails,
Sure.
and but the whole life I loved the Parkway, and it was such a treasure, because that came along in the 30s when the whole area was suffering, and that's what put people back to work with the WPA.
Millie, there was a $300,000 state grant for the Doughton Park.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do our Congress people work on it or support it? A little bit about how did that money come to, Allegheny County, I guess it was.
Well, I go to the legislature, I've walked the hall for years, and ask them for it.
And then Ms. Ballard, I guess she was a key
She was
factor
major,
in it.
yes. Deanna Ballard did a great job. Jeffrey Elmore there helped out, you know, with that. And now we have Ray Russell, you know, from Blowing Rock, Ray's Weather for all those years. And so we have 3 really good folks there, and Sarah Stevens from...
Now, where are we today on the Doughton Park project?
Well, I think we're going to let bids soon on the coffee shop and getting that open, because, you know, when you were there for the ribbon cutting, of course, we opened the visitor center there and the bookstore, and that was really exciting to get that going. And the next, and I toured the building, it's in good shape. We went through all the historic documentation. We have to make a few changes, you know, to structure to have more in the bathroom facilities and, you know, that type. And of course the plumbing and wiring, which are major. But I've got several people who want to take a look at that and see about operating it. And the thing I have said to the Park Service and to the foundation, the Parkway Foundation, they've been instrumental in putting all this together. But the thing I want is for us to hire local people.
Yes. Yeah.
I've got contractors, I've got some restaurant folks who'd like to go up, and there are others, you know, from other areas, and people at our meeting yesterday had named some potential folks.
What were you doing yesterday?
Well, we were reviewing all the work
same group
that needs to do.
Met up for the ribbon cutting.
These were different folks who've contributed to the foundation and are helping, you know, to make decisions on getting this done. And Brian, the town manager, you know, in Sparta, and we had different folks, you know, like that, who just have a major interest and want to see it done. Mm-hmm. And I love bringing those folks together, because that's how we move forward. Right. And getting, again, building the consensus and having people, and I want our local folks to be able to operate it. And that, if you remember growing up, we'd go eat and the food was incredible, and everybody said had the best fried chicken in the world. So
wow.
So
that?
we want to have traditional things, but we also realize that times have changed and, you know, we need to meet the needs of the folks, and we looked all around and whether we kept some of the stools that were around the counter.
Did you?
And yes, we're going to
Wow.
keep some of those because we had the photo of the interior, and then we have tables. And because historically, you stick to the tradition and what was, you know, the right elements of
I
everything
think
to be historic.
Richard and Jane Doughton were there,
yes.
and very wonderful people.
Yes.
And his grandfather Bob was instrumental
Oh,
in the Parkway
definitely.
being in North Carolina.
Well, he's primarily the reason
Yeah.
that we got it here at that time. And like I said, when they took, and it never happened these days because when they took people's land, but folks were very happy to help,
Sure.
you know, because
Yeah.
what had happened with the economy,
Yeah.
you know, as a result of that.
Millie, you also were in Hickory
Mm-hmm.
for a number of years. Let's take, that was more of a tourism, was it?
Well, it was
about?
tourism.
Let's talk
and,
about that.
Well, when we opened the Hickory Metro Convention Center there, that's where our offices were, but I had also, with Hickory, we'd done a great deal of architecture study and published, you know, the books, and like the one I had done, you know, for, this is the architectural one for Burke County that we had done in 1982, 3, and won that major award for it. And this is what we've encouraged across the state for each of the county
Right.
architectural inventories to be published. And I do think we still need to do Wilkes County.
Mm-hmm.
This one is Laura Phillips, good friend, who's in Winston-Salem, and these are simple
did this
treasures.
book.
She did this book. And she was on, when I was chairing the National Register Advisory Board, Laura was on there, and that, I've retired from that one. But this is major when you look at all the properties that are here. And
Wow.
the one I was bringing up, of course, too, was the Flincham House that we hope the painting on the walls, and they're in storage. They are phenomenal. And
Really?
so many of our 1800 and 1850 and that era, there were itinerant painters or artists
Wow.
traveling through. They got no money, but they got some room and board and food.
Just traveling
Traveling through and painting. And
for room and board.
if you look in some of these magazines and just look at the documentation on here, but look at the ceiling. Look at the ceiling.
I see that.
Look at the marbleized wall paintings, and many of these things, particularly like the 1812 Charles McDowell, Quaker Meadows House in Morganton.
Uh-huh.
These were just talented folks moving along, a little room and board. They paint and do all of that great architectural work. So that's why we've got to preserve it.
So you're in West Jefferson now.
Yes.
Have we touched on all of the historical things you're involved in right now?
Well, I'm on the Blue Ridge National Heritage Board, which serves the 25 mountain counties in western North Carolina. And it's about preserving our heritage. It's particularly, and I think you've seen that, we got the book on the music trails of North Carolina.
Right.
And the craft trail. And that's how, when my friend Becky Anderson, who was at our meeting yesterday, started Handmade in America.
Tell us about that.
Well, Handmade was, when she started that, it was to call attention to all the wonderful pottery, all the paintings, everything that we have still going on throughout the West, all of the craft. And that was, again, was another way for people to stimulate the economy. And
Is that a Handmade in America? Is that a manufacturing facility?
No,
Or what
those
is
are
that?
people themselves, those artists. We bring them together, and you know, they sell their own wares and everything, but we just spread the word and help market where they are so people can find them.
Okay.
And we want that particular, the craft to be shared and moved, you know, so that our young people coming along will know how to make pottery or how to crochet, and if you remember all of the quilt making, because we have the quilt trail throughout the mountain too, and that's still, you know, something major. And then with our music, to keep all of our musicians, you know about the jam group, the Junior Appalachian musicians, those kids, because they performed that day. We did the ribbon cutting, and the Heritage area helps give them some funding to keep that going. And there's a great group, just primarily.
I know the
in
Reeves
mountains.
Theater is the driving force behind it is the restoration of the music, and David Holt and Wayne Henderson. And Wayne was there last Saturday night, and David's coming the 23rd, I think, of March, and such an icon, such a contributor he is.
David's incredible, and he's done so much to call attention to the history and all the musicians, and it's written and, you know, made people very aware. And we try to do the Heritage area, we do concerts and things throughout the area, and then, you know, on the Parkway, you've got the Music Center up there.
What is the Overmountain Victory Trail?
Well, that was on the way to Kings Mountain, the Battle of Kings Mountain.
All right.
And from coming through Morganton and stopping there at Quaker Meadows, Charles McDowell, and he was one of the major Revolutionary War leaders, and then they went on to Kings Mountain. But they came out of Tennessee and Kentucky and Surrey County and met basically there at Quaker
In Elkin?
Meadows.
Is that part of it?
Though that's, well, they came from Elkin too,
Wow.
And that's where they met, and then went on down to Kings Mountain to fight that battle and win.
Do you have a favorite story? Do you have something's happened along the way that would be good for us to just hear you?
I have lots of things.
Lots of them, I'm sure. I just thought maybe you would maybe have something you could treasure along the way.
Well, I've treasured every one of these things because I still, with the people that we worked with, and all across the state, particularly because when I was in Beaufort, and you know about the Maritime Museum.
Yeah.
And I was the token female on the Maritime Museum because we were preserving, you know, all the coastal area and region with that. And Rodney Barfield, who was at the Maritime Museum, director, he and I are working on a book that will be based on the Flincham House, because I had given him a lot of the historic research and everything that Laura had done, and regional from, you know, the Mount Airy and the Pilot Mountain areas. And so that hopefully will be coming out soon. And he and his wife Yale live outside Charlottesville, Virginia. But we've stayed in touch, and with the work he has done, and research and writing, and so we'll get them down and go down to Mount Pilot.
I want to make sure we mention the Order of the Longleaf Pine, a great honor that you received. Tell us about when and where, and how does that make you feel?
Well, that was a tremendous honor to have that, and that was Governor Beverly Perdue, and she had been the senator, you know, as well, but we had become good friends long before that because she was from New Bern, and when I was doing historic Beaufort, and we collaborated on a number of projects because downtown New Bern,
You're right.
as you know, with all of their history, we worked closely on that. And the town of Edenton and all of eastern North Carolina, there's such rich history
Right.
there as
Yeah.
well. And the beauty I've had is just to participate in all of that and work hard to just encourage people to protect it.
Yeah.
And our farm, you know, one of the things like the conservation I get very concerned with is that it's great to have lots of development, but we're losing a lot of our wonderful, valuable farmland.
Right.
And if we're going to feed everybody, we still have to farm. And it's been interesting in working, you know, with across the state and seeing.
Let's mention Patrick Woody
Yes.
before we close. Just
Well.
tell us about the role he plays, has played, is playing, and will play in these restoration of things that really going to matter to people.
Well, and Patrick, I told you, he and his mom and I had lunch this past week because he was home because their friend Ernest Banyan had passed away, you know, in West Jefferson, and so we were at his memorial service and then had lunch. And Patrick was at the chamber, Allegheny Chamber, when I was director of High Country Hose.
Okay.
And I had the 5 counties. We later added Wilkes County to it, but we had worked then, and he had, of course, now that he's head of the Rural Center, and that's one thing I want to encourage all of our people, the Rural Center is still doing incredible, the best job for the Far East and the Far West.
Really?
And
Good.
yes.
Thank you for that.
Well, and Patrick has done.
We're big
just,
fans of Patrick.
Well, he's done a great job, and we had worked together on like the New River
Yeah.
Community
Saving the
Partners.
New River.
Saving the New River.
And you were right in the middle of that?
Yep.
Wow.
And
way to
had
go.
we not gotten that designation of a heritage river, we could be living underwater.
Right.
And, well, it would be there actually from Todd, you know,
Yes,
where
yeah.
Todd, and then if you go on and go into Allegheny County, you know, you've got Ashe, Allegheny,
yeah.
and then you go into Virginia, and so much of that beautiful area back there by Creston and Lansing could have been underwater.
So you were there. Whoa, what a tremendous tribute to your legacy.
Well, I'm just blessed to have had an opportunity, and like I
And
said,
you were willing to work at it.
I worked hard, and
Good.
as I tease them now, I work all the time, I just don't get paid.
Thank you for being with us today. My dear friend Millie Barbee, who's a legacy and has a real heritage and a heart that matters in special ways. So this has been People Doing Good for Others. I'm glad you're with us. Look for us on the next Tuesday night. And remember that happy people are seeking and finding ways to serve God, family, friends, and worthy causes. Historical preservation, a most worthy cause. And thank you,
Thank
Millie
you.
Barbee,
This
for
is so
being
much
with us.
fun.